Hi, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Faster Way podcast. I am so excited to be here today with Tamsen Fadal, and we are going to talk about how to menopause, which is your new book, Tamsen. I can't wait to dive in.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited about it. I like it. It finally came out after 3 years of research on it. So it's finally here. And yeah, I really appreciate it because I feel like we have not talked about perimenopause or menopause enough to where people feel comfortable. And we need to normalize that word. There's no question about it.
Yeah, yeah. And we just found out we could have literally been neighbors. Your entire family lives on an island close to my island. So next time you're in Tampa, we have got to get together.
I was literally, as you were doing this intro, I was just thinking of it. I was like, I wonder if we could put together a big fun event there, have some coffee
Totally.
and mocktails or cocktails and have fun. So yeah, I would love that. I would love
That
that.
is great. That is great. Well, we are going to dive into perimenopause and menopause and how to really thrive through this period. And I told you in our pre interview chat, I just last week, so less than a week ago, went from 38 to 39. And so I've been very well aware of the perimenopause conversation that's become more popular even over the last couple of years. But first, before we dive into the details and the symptoms and how to overcome these different things, when and why did you personally become so interested in women's health in particular?
Yeah, I became really interested because it happened to me. It became a real personal story. So I was a journalist for about 30 years and I told everyone else's story. And I One night was sitting on the anchor desk in New York City. I read the evening news and I got what I now learned was a hot flash and anxiety and my heart racing out of control where I could hear it in my ears. And I had to leave the broadcast and I landed on the floor of the ladies' bathroom to just kind of calm my whole body down. Fast forward about 6 weeks, and I got a note back in my patient portal. I was going to a couple of different doctors. I'm like, am I not handling stress right? Was that my heart? What
Sure.
was going on? And the doctor wrote, my longtime doctor wrote, in menopause, dot, 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 any questions? And that was it. And so I found out I was in menopause. And then I realized looking back, all these crazy symptoms of nutty periods, low libido, brain fog, which I didn't even have a word for them, were all a result of perimenopause. So lo and behold, I started talking about it and then I couldn't stop. I started on social media and just kept going really. And I've just seen this community grow and grow with a lot of questions and a lot of confusion, quite frankly.
Yeah. And now, how old were you when that incident happened behind the desk?
Yeah, so I was 48 at the time. I was
Okay.
49 when I got the diagnosis because it was right before my birthday. And yeah, so I've been talking about it quite quite a while, all through the pandemic. And during the pandemic, I had a lot of time on my hands. I was we're doing the news from my back office here at home. We couldn't even be in a studio. So that's how I kind of started doing these videos online and then just didn't stop. And those went from videos to putting together a documentary about menopause to writing a book about perimenopause and menopause.
Okay, amazing. And I feel like in the past, probably 2 to 5 years, so really the same time frame that you're talking about, perimenopause has become more mainstream. People understand what that term even means. I remember in 2021, I did a training with our wellness director, and we discussed this term perimenopause. And at the time I was pregnant, I was 35 and pregnant, and she
Yeah.
goes, "Yeah, it really starts at 35." And my jaw dropped. I was
Yeah.
like, "What?" I was like, I mean, I was literally pregnant, so I'm like, I don't know, I'm not having symptoms right now, but I couldn't believe that really technically many people will say perimenopause starts as early as 35, and in your case, it sounds like, you were already 48, 49 time frame, but
Yep.
wow,
Yeah,
it's
I was
such an
at
important.
normal age, but hearing that, when you hear baseline, you should be start thinking about that at 35. It's shocking, right?
Yes, yes.
And why did no one tell us? I mean, we've got so many women that go straight from reproductive years right into symptoms, not even knowing if it's a crossover between the two, which is
Right.
which. So it's really important to know for a couple of different reasons. One, so that you don't feel like something else is really wrong with you.
Mhm.
Two, I think that you waste a lot of time trying to play whack-a-mole with these symptoms instead of looking at what's going on, how you can treat it, whether you want it to be hormonal, non-hormonal lifestyle, and then what the long-term ramifications are. when you're talking about this, because it's not just about hot flashes or, not being able to sleep. There's a lot of things you got to look at long term with brain, bone, and heart health.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's dive into that because how would a woman know that she is in perimenopause, specifically if she still has regular periods? Because that is a very uh, common, uh, anecdote from clients of mine. They'll say, "Well, there's no way I'm in perimenopause. I still have a regular period." But then when they talk about the brain fog and they talk about hating their husband for 10 days a month, type thing, I'm like, I don't know. Maybe we should look into this.
It's interesting because I was at a book signing earlier this week in Denver, and a woman stood up to me and stood up and said, like, I don't know. I mean, I've only got like, I'm dealing with weight, I'm dealing with sleep, but I don't really have hot flashes, but I have brain fog and I'm kind of irritable. And I was like, but you got it. So when you look at periods, because that's one of the hallmark, obviously, of everything, right? Menopause is 12 months without your period. Perimenopause is everything before that time. So perimenopause, oftentimes women will have very irregular periods, right? It'll be heavy one month. You'll maybe you were the person that was always right every 28 days, and now it's a little all over the place. That is one of the telltale signs, like, okay, something's going on. Could it be something else? Of course. Should you go make sure that it's not? Of course. If you're looking at some of the other things, though, such as not being able to sleep, irritability, brain fog, going into a room, not remembering why, having a conversation,
Mm,
can't finish the sentence, things that were very normal and easy to you, not being able to sleep as well, a lot of sleep disruption, hot flashes, night sweats. You don't need a blood test to tell you that is perimenopause. That is symptom diagnosed, and most doctors will say that symptom diagnosed. And you can say most likely if you're in this age bracket, late 30s on up, you're probably going into, if not in the height of perimenopause.
yeah, yeah. And now what have you found is a typical time frame once someone comes to you and says, "Okay, yes, I am just like the gal you mentioned.
Yeah.
I'm not sleeping as well. I'm not having hot flashes, but I'm having the brain fog." Like, what is a typical time frame? Are you seeing it be a 10-year period, a 15-year? Does it completely depend?
Yeah, it is. It's so 51 is the average age of menopause in the US. And if you look back, you can look 4 to 7 to 10 years. That could be the perimenopause times. So if you look back at that, you say approximately 41. But that doesn't mean that some people could start at 38. Some people could start earlier than that with hormonal fluctuations. That's essentially what we're talking about. So it's funny. Some people will be like, "Oh my gosh, should I not take care of myself the right way?" And that's why I went into menopause or perimenopause early. No, it has not. That's not what's going on. I mean, everybody comes by it differently and individually. It's good if your mom is there to talk about to see if she went into an earlier perimenopause or menopause. But for the most part, all of us go by this differently with very, very different symptoms.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it'd be great if there was a guidebook, just like with
Yeah.
parenting, or even with, postpartum. It's like I would love to have had a little guidebook or rule book or say, here's exactly what to expect. Here's your timeline, but that's just not the case. I remember when I was in high school, so I struggled with PCOS, that you might be familiar with, polycystic ovary syndrome. And at that time, my periods were all over the place. My cycles were extremely abnormal. I was on fertility medication to get pregnant with my first 2 babies, then my last 3, I got pregnant naturally, but right now, at just turned 39 last week, my periods are more regular than they've ever been in my entire life. Like, it is really interesting, and so much of
Really?
that is due to the faster rate of fat loss,
Mhm.
but, I still absolutely can feel the fluctuations. I feel like because I struggled with PCOS and had to go through the journey of balancing my hormones and really optimizing my metabolism as a result of that, maybe I set myself up for a little bit more success right now in this season of being in my late 30s. But, I feel things can just shift and change so quickly as well.
Oh my gosh, so quickly. But I think lifestyle changes are huge to do
Yeah.
that. And setting yourself up in that way is incredibly important. And I think a lot of us that are 45 and 55 wish that we had known some of these things so it didn't seem like such a big to-do list, right? So,
Yeah.
when I went through the book, I wanted to make sure that there are non-hormonal options and there are lifestyle changes because that can happen at any time, way early or way late. I don't think it's ever too late, and I don't think it's ever too early to implement those
Mm,
lifestyle changes, just so you're not trying to shove them all in at the same
yeah.
time, 'cause it can be really difficult. You don't want a
Yeah.
list that makes you unwell.
So let's talk about some of those lifestyle changes. And I agree, it can be so overwhelming. So let's maybe start with the most low hanging fruit from your book.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the lifestyle changes and I kind of back up a little bit. Sleep, I think I put that chapter right after all the symptoms and understanding hormonal options and non-hormonal options. And the reason that I did that was because I don't think you can get anything else accomplished really well without getting the sleep under control. It's impossible to feel like you want to work out. It's impossible to feel like you're not going to munch on things all day long because now you're trying to wake up a little bit. It's hard to like even think if it's brain fog or something else. So I put sleep as one of the big areas and low hanging fruit and at least something that you can control or try to take charge of. And trust me, it's not easy. I went a lot of years very sleep deprived. But that's where I think there's supplementations and there's habits that can be formed that can help things before you talk about any other kind of aids to help with that. And then the next one is nutrition and movement and body. I mean, strength training and protein are the two things we're hearing about over and over again. It's easy to hear about them. It's hard to implement them. And so I wanted this to be something where women can start in the very beginning, middle, or if they're advanced. And I think it's important to be able to know that. So you're going into this feeling like you're kind of teed up for success already. And then if you need to go to the doctor and talk about all the other changes, and there are a lot, then at least I think you're halfway there. You know, you're already ahead quite a bit. And then I guess the fourth one would be mindset. And again, I don't think any of these are necessarily easy to deal with, but I think the awareness of them makes them a lot easier.
Absolutely. Everyone listening and my clients in particular know that I've struggled with insomnia since high school, which probably was because of the hormones that were not quite balanced during PCOS time frame before I really was able to reverse that. But for you personally, what would you say was the biggest lever when it comes to improving your sleep? Was it progesterone? Was it your nighttime routine? What was it?
Yeah, I think it was a split between the two, if I'm being honest, because I think progesterone was really, really helpful. But
Yeah.
I really had to establish those habits too, because it's not a miracle thing. Like sometimes like last night, I had 1,000 things on my mind because I had just gotten home from traveling and I was like, oh, I'm not sleeping tonight. I could already tell. And then I went, okay, now you got to go back to the habits. Like sometimes it makes me just go to sleep. And sometimes I need to establish those habits because I don't want to always say that that's the only thing I rely on. I also want to have a good night's sleep, and that is blacking out the room. That is unwinding earlier than I did last night. That is magnesium that I do. And
Mhm.
I try not to go crazy with supplements, but there are some that I do swear by for me anyway. And and I also talk a lot about some of the unwinding in different ways throughout the day because I think that that's helpful too. A sleep doctor told me we interviewed 42 experts for this book, and it was really important for me to focus on sleep. And one of the sleep doctors said to me, "You can't just jump into bed and be like, okay, I'm going to sleep. Like that's it. Like it doesn't work like that. You don't do that in any other part of your life, but you expect to do it there." And I went, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense. You're
Yeah.
right. I expect
Yeah.
to get into bed and fall asleep." So insomnia is no joke. And especially as you move into this stage in life and you see it even, multiplied in so many ways. So
Mm.
learning those habits as best you can now is so important.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you have to find what works for you. What works for you, Tamsin, is different than what's gonna work for me, but also what works for me right now is probably different, and I hate to say it, than what works for me in 6 months.
Yes,
A lot of times,
100%.
I will start a supplement, you'll start a supplement, and it's like 3 months, I feel great, and then I kinda hit the 5th or the 6th month, and I'm like, "Man, my body's not responding quite as much to that particular supplement. I need to kinda back off that, try something different." And it's unfair because my husband can put his head on that pillow and immediately fall asleep, and it is just not fair at all because I'm not.
I did this video. I know I did this video about my husband. I was like, I can hear him breathing
Yes.
next to me, and I'm like, ugh, what?
Yes.
What? And then I'm like, okay, I'll just try to breathe in unison with him. And then he's already asleep, so he's breathing like faster or slower, would depending on the night. And I'm like, this just sucks. So
Yes.
I have a spot on the couch, like this couch right behind me. I have like this one little spot in a little blanket, and he'll come out in the morning. He'll be like, another tough night, and I'm like, yeah. So
Oh
it's
my gosh.
my sleep area, and I spent a long time on there before I got my sleep together. A long time on that couch.
The difference between you and me is I kick Brandon out of the bed because what happens is he immediately falls asleep within, like, I'm not kidding you, probably 90 seconds, and then 20 minutes in, he must be in deep sleep, and he starts snoring,
Right,
every
right, right.
single night. That's right when I'm gonna start to kind of drift away, drift
Right,
off,
right.
so then I end up just, like, rolling him over every single night. I'm, like, hitting him, but then if
Right,
he
right.
starts snoring again, I'm like, "You're outta here, man." Like,
That's great.
we're
Love it.
done.
I
So
love that. I love that. See, I leave the room.
no, girl, you need to stay in the bed.
I guess
Um,
so, right?
so this is a great transition into kind of this subject of couples and partners and spouses. I have girlfriends who are, a few years older than me, and I just know I can, like, basically predict it on my calendar when I'm gonna get a text from a
Yeah.
best friend who's like, "I hate my husband, da 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 da, blah, da da," and I'm just like, "Okay." Like, I always listen, but I also know, like, "Okay, 2 weeks from now, you're gonna be great," So
I know.
what is it hormonally that's happening that's causing this situation? And I heard recently a stat about the increase of divorces from, like, 43 to, like, 53 or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, I know, I know. We're seeing a lot of these different numbers right now. I think what's interesting is the fact that I was hearing over and over like women were hating their husbands, and I was like, maybe it's just like they've been in a relationship a long time. But listen, our hormones are changing right now. Estrogen causes low libido. There's no question about or lack of estrogen. So we got low libido, we got painful sex if you're feeling
Mm,
dry all over your body, and it's just a time and irritability. So it's just a time that's the person that's closest to you that causes that real like irritation. And I've seen it over and over and over again to like scary words. Like one woman said to me, I wanted to poison him. And I'm like, what? Tell people that. But it's this like rage and then it goes
yeah.
away. But it's
Mhm.
not uncommon to see that over and over again. And I just think it's the first time we started talking about it. The good news is that men are hearing that conversation and men are,
Mm.
oh, good. It's actually not just me. It's like it's what's going on there, and I just have to be aware of it. And so I do think that there's something to the fact that we're talking about it now in the way we're talking about it. So I feel very, very good about that.
Okay, so I'm going to dive into this a little bit more, and I know I'm gonna get some trolls online. It's fine. What is the balance of taking some personal responsibility versus just saying like, "Oh, I'm a 43-year-old female and that's just how it's gonna be, and everyone around me is gonna have to suffer, my kids and my husband during this time frame." Like, where's that balance of saying like, "No, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna make sure that I kind of plan ahead and I'm not trying to be mean. And again, I'm not in this phase, but I genuinely want the advice so that I can start prepping as well."
No, I think it's a great question. I mean, look, here's what I think. I think that what I hope women do instead of just, I'm taking responsibility for it is taking charge of their health during this time because it's not just these things. It's not just these symptoms, 34 symptoms, 100 symptoms, whatever it is. It really is long-term health. It really is trying to avoid osteopenia and osteoporosis. It
Yeah.
really is trying to avoid heart disease, which, can really be an issue for women. We see so many women die every year of heart disease, every single day of heart disease. It really is looking at Alzheimer's numbers and realize that women are more prone and seeing that number of women with dementia. So I hope that women do it for themselves more than anything else, rather than to not be the irritable raging one to do it so that they feel better, because I do know that there's a way to do that. There are options for them that don't have to include hormone therapy, or if they're not eligible for it or they don't want to take it. And then there's options that are lifestyle that you start young so that when you hit this age, it doesn't seem like, oh my gosh, it's all going to be over. Because that's the last thing I want. I really want women to feel like this is a transition through the life and then they move through it, not like, oh my God, what are we doing? And that's why we're hearing so much about it right now, because we've never talked about it before.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it'll be like that forever, but I think it's going to be like this for a while.
Yeah. Who would not be eligible for hormone therapy? You said, some people wouldn't be comfortable, but then other people just wouldn't be eligible. Who
Yeah,
would
there's
that group
different
be?
contraindications. I mean, if you have a family history of breast cancer, most doctors will say that you are still eligible. I lost my mother when she was 51. I am still eligible.
Mm.
If you personally have a history of an estrogen positive breast cancer, most likely a doctor is going to not want to prescribe, or they're going to talk to you about it depending on stage and depending on what they've seen in terms of treatment and where you are after that. There's, a history of blood clots, personal history, and otherwise, it really depends. It also depends on if you're 10 years out of menopause. So if you hit menopause at 51 and now you're 61, you're like, hey, I might want to go on hormone therapy. That's going to be individual again. Guidelines say within a 10-year period is when it's the most effective. So now women are saying, hey, I wasn't offered this because, my doctor didn't know anything. Can I get it now? Because of all these benefits that we see that are coming with HRT. And so that's going to be an individual basis. But personal history of breast cancer, which I think is one of the, I'm sorry, not personal history, just a family history. Most women think they cannot do hormone therapy, but that is not the case. And most doctors that are knowledgeable about it will tell you that. And then with regard to vaginal estrogen, everyone is, that's a pretty much one size that everyone can do, and can be really helpful when it comes to low libido and painful
Interesting.
sex in particular.
Okay, that's great to know. And tell me a little bit more about what type of doctor I would need to go to, because you said if your doctor is knowledgeable, but my guess, like so many things that my clients deal with, whether they are in their 30s or even 50s, related to maybe something that might be a little bit more functional medicine, related. What, like, am I going to my regular OBGYN? Am I having to find someone who's a little bit more integrative or functional? What's your experience there?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've been to integrative doctors all my life, and so I say that first and foremost. I went back to school to IIN so I could get a degree as a
Great.
coach. Yeah, and I did it not to be a coach necessarily, but to just know it for myself. So that's always
Mhm.
been a huge part of that was a huge part of my mom's, what my mom did for herself back in the 80s
Mm.
and 90s. And so that's just been a big part of my life. But what we're hopeful for is that more practitioners and more disciplines learn about all of these things so they're going to be able to be good providers or educators or nurse practitioners. If you have an OBGYN that is knowledgeable, that is willing to talk about your options, whether it's hormone therapy or not hormone therapy, then you're very, very lucky. If you need to find somebody, there's a lot of telehealth and telemedicine out there that can be very, very useful depending on areas that, you might not have a doctor in your area. And then look, if you've got a doctor that's integrative or functional medicine that can talk about this, amazing. Because I think it's really important. I don't think it just ends in the doctor's office, and I don't think it's a one size fits all. And I do think that women that might not be eligible or want to take hormones have got to have other options. We can't just tell women that there's one thing, and if they don't want to do that, then we don't know. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm hopeful there's more research when it comes to supplementation, when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to movement, when it comes to stress management. So we don't just think of those as luxuries.
Yeah, yeah. In our clinical trial for the faster way to fat loss, we specifically worked with ladies from a variety of ages, but we had several in their 40s, 50s, perimenopause, menopause timeframe. And we proved that women could decrease visceral fat while also increasing muscle simultaneously, which is just so profound because typically that wasn't the case. And, women are eating less and exercising more and losing muscle mass while losing weight, but then gaining it back and da da da. So it's been pretty exciting. And one of our board members is actually the leading researcher on women's fat loss, but he's now really diving into perimenopause and menopause as a result of what his wife journeyed through. And it's really, really exciting. And he's posting regularly and saying things that are pretty controversial and getting lots of trolls
I'm
from all the
sure.
brosifs.
I think that any research that we can do to show women how to make this transition um, a little bit easier and a little bit more understandable is just so critical right now. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that that's where it goes next, and that we can help women feel like they're not alone in the journey, and not alone in trying to fight for help.
Yeah, yeah. As we wrap up, I want to hear what surprised you the most while researching for your book. What was like, oh my gosh, this was such an aha moment for me, or I can't believe what this expert said about da da da. Like, what was most surprising to you?
Yeah, I think what was most surprising, I guess, to me was realizing how little a lot of the doctors knew and that they were not educated. And I always want to say that it is not their fault. Like they weren't taught this in medical school. A lot of the schools did not teach it. And so I am so grateful to the ones that are learning on their own and doing education and research. And so I always, I did this book so that women could feel like they could take charge. So they could walk into a doctor's office and say, look, I have this. Can you help me figure out a solution? Or I read this, and this, because I don't think, women are very, very smart. And if we've got that information in front of us, we can put it to use. And that was what was important to me because I understand the numbers. It's a numbers, there's a billion women out there and they need help and they need help now. We don't have time to wait 20 more years to do another batch of research. They have to stop suffering now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, where can we find you and follow you online?
Yeah, of course. I'm anywhere on social media at Tamsen Fadal and tamsenfadal.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tamsin. We truly appreciate your time and we're better off for it.
Thank you so much.